Good evening.
Good evening.
How's everybody tonight?
Very good.
Good. My name is Kevin Mayer. I'm a Bear Valley resident. I spent about between 43 and 45 years working in the HVACR trade, heating, ventilating, air conditioning, refrigeration. I spent the last 17 years of my working career as a corporate trainer for a large wholesale house. And one of the lines that we picked up was Kohler residential generators. Kohler decided Generac had too much of the market. They wanted a piece of the pie. So they started getting into the residential side. I was the trainer at that point, and they had me go to Kohler. I learned all about generators and started teaching a 3-day generator installation and service class. As of right now, I am semi...
Could you use the microphone?
I would prefer not to, because I like to walk around when I talk.
Okay. There's not a long cord out there.
I'll talk a little louder. How about that?
That's good.
Okay. I'll be good and hoarse when I get home. I do not currently work for any company that sells generators. I have no brand affiliation whatsoever. I only wore the fancy shirt because I had it. And the whole purpose is not to focus you on one particular brand, but to show you what options are out there and give you an idea of how to choose what you think will work best for you. Okay, so I'm not in this for any kind of money. In fact, I actually paid for the handouts myself, so.
Thank you.
Not that there's much there. That's why it's only 2 pages. Okay. I'm just a guy with an extension cord and a fancy shirt. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I love this.
This is our new California state flag. I can't take credit for it. It was on, I think it was on Nextdoor, and I swiped the picture. But is it our new reality?
Yes.
Maybe.
Shouldn't be.
I heard a guy from PG&E say 10 years. I heard a guy from Southern Cal Edison say 1. It's somewhere in there. Okay, if it would just rain, we'd be all right? Now I'm going to start off with some stuff because this is really, some things are really serious about this. Okay? First of all, fossil fuel powered generators create carbon monoxide. It is a very real danger and it will kill you. Okay? Never place a generator near an opening window or door. Make sure there's adequate airflow around the genset. It needs to be kept cool, and we want to dilute the combustion byproduct gases. Follow manufacturers' installation manuals to a T. Okay, they're not guidelines, they're requirements. Always use a functioning battery backup carbon monoxide detector. It could save your life. And that goes for virtually any kind of gas-fired appliance you have in your house. Okay? Remember, operating generators are hot. Electricity can kill you. And as the sign says, whoops, not only will it kill you, it will hurt while you are dying. I don't laugh at this much. When I took my generator class, we had a bunch of guys from a company called Dixie Power. And they were good old Southern boys, and they were always cutting up and cracking up and making jokes. And one morning at the class, they came in and they were very quiet. One of their fellow employees was found dead over a generator and it was just a residential generator. It was not a big industrial one. So have a healthy respect for electricity, please. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to reinforce that you need to pay attention to the details. So our class purpose today is not to turn you into a generator technician. You will not be one when you leave this class. It takes a little bit longer than that. My purpose is to help you make informed buying decisions so that you don't end up regretting the system you paid a lot of money for. Okay? Again, always follow manufacturer's installation and operating requirements. Now, I kind of like this. It's kind of fun. You can see we've got that really ultra-modern generator there on the right-hand side. That is one of the first models of standby generators ever built, and it was developed by Kohler Company. Yes, the same people that make toilets and faucets. So, built in 1920, and everybody else has simply refined the product. So what else are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about what happens inside a generator in very, very general and brief terms, because I could spend an hour on that alone without any problem. What type of generators are available for emergency use? How do we size a generator? And there are lots of things that will do it for us, or lots of ways to do it for us. One of them, with the little handout that you got, is a very basic sizing guide. There are also some websites you can go to, and I would recommend you do 2 or 3 to come up with the same answer for both. We're going to talk about different fuels and how they affect a generator, because you may end up using one that is a dual fuel generator, and there are reasons for that. We're going to talk about how we get from utility power to the appliances or the lights in your house. What I think are the best ways to do it. Okay? I'm going to talk about generator placement in very general terms, because every manufacturer's specs are different. They're in the installation manual or the user manual. I'll talk about safety, permits, and wire sizing for extension cords. I'll talk about basic general maintenance, and then I'll field your questions. So or any additional questions you may have. Now, because there's so many people, the ground rule I'd like to set is, if your question does not pertain to the slide I'm showing, please wait till the end of the class. There are too many people here, and we aren't going to get through this in a timely manner if everybody's asking questions about different parts of the presentation when we're not there. Okay? And the one thing I will tell you is, if I don't know the answer, I will tell you that, because I don't claim to know everything. I know just enough to get into real trouble. Got to lighten the mood a little bit, right? Okay, here we go. So, very basically, what we have are conductors. Whoops. We have conductors. Okay. We have movement, which takes our DC power that our generator makes and turns it into AC power. And then we are able, at that point, to power a load. So if you look inside a generator, the stator, which are has the conductors, looks something like this. Okay? you can see that we have a rotor inside. This is known as a two-pole rotor. It's got a north pole and a south pole. And we will take our DC power, and with this pole, we can change it to make it AC current. How fast we turn this rotor determines the hertz, or the frequency, of the electrical waves. And here in the United States, we use 60 hertz power. So we're turning this 60 cycles a second, which means our generator motor that's turning this rotor is turning at 3,600 RPMs. Now, when you get into big generators, typically 30 kilowatts or bigger, you get four-pole rotors. And they turn at 1,800 RPMs, and they're much quieter. They're also more reliable because you're turning a lot slower. They're also a lot more expensive because you've got a lot more material. Okay. So hertz is our frequency. 60 cycles is our friend. Below 60 cycles is not our friend. Neither is above. Okay? This is what the actual rotor looks like inside a generator. This is one of the reasons they're so heavy. So what kind of generators are we going to talk about for use here in Bear Valley? Standby whole house is one of them. We have standby essential load. We have portable generators for emergency use, or job site use, or RVs. And then a new kind of generator that's coming on the market, has been for the last few years, is an inverter. And it works a little differently than a regular generator does, and I'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes. So how do I select? Well, the first thing you have to do is decide what is important to you. If you want a whole house, this is the lady. I want no changes to my lifestyle, and I want my MTV. I love crowds my age because I can make these jokes and we all know what it refers to. Are there medical devices that require constant power? What do I really want besides basics? As I go down this list, I'm paring it down to get smaller and smaller. The refrigerator, heat, and a few lights are fine. Where does this all fit within my budget? To a great sense, you get what you pay for. And by the way, what kind of fuel am I going to use? There are a number of fuels available. There's gasoline, propane, natural gas, and diesel are the primary ones. Those are the ones I'm going to talk about. There are solar generating systems, but I'm not going there because I don't know anything about them. Other than they will most likely be fairly expensive by comparison. So standby whole house. Like this young lady over here said, she wants everything. Okay? They're permanently set in one location. Any of you remember the Kohler generator commercial they had a few years ago? And there was a family dancing and the power went out. And within the course of the commercial, the generator started and transferred over and they started dancing again. All within 10 seconds, which is incredibly fast because you've got, with a whole house generator, you typically have about 3 seconds waiting to make sure the power is really out. Okay? They're typically quieter than most portable generators, except for some of the new inverter style are very, very quiet. They exercise or run either on a weekly or bi-weekly schedule. And as a homeowner, that's a good thing because you know that they're working. It also keeps the oil circulating in the motor and keeps it lubricated because, again, inside 10 seconds, I'm starting this generator, I'm running at 3,600 RPMs. Do you get in your car and romp on the gas pedal first thing? Well, maybe that 1953 Chevrolet that was your first car, you might have had to just to get it to run. You know, when the starter used to be up by the accelerator pedal? Yeah. You don't do that. But that's what you're asking a generator to do. The transfer switch starts the generator in seconds of a power loss. Once the generator is running, power becomes stable, it switches over, and your life goes on as if nothing ever happened, except now you have to wait for your DirecTV or Dish TV to go through the block, to go through its cable cycle, and you missed that one really important part of the TV show. Kind of like the old days when, the Super Bowl was on and they showed the movie Heidi over the end and the game completely changed. Okay. The other thing about these is they can be controlled and monitored from far away. The owner of the company that I worked for had a lot of money. And I used to get texts from him. My generator didn't shut off, and I'm in Hawaii. Can you swing by my house and take a look? Well, gee, I'm only 2.5 hours away. Okay. Again, typically propane or natural gas or diesel. The fuel lines have to be sized correctly. I'll talk about a little bit about that in a few minutes. And gas generators are set up for natural gas, but are easily changed over to propane. In fact, the kit comes with it. It takes about 5 minutes. Standby generator is going to look something like this. We're going to use a transfer switch that can be connected either to utility power or generator power, but not both simultaneously. And that's very important. I talked with an electrical supervisor today and he made sure that I would tell you, you cannot wire a generator into a circuit that can be fed by utility power at the same time. It's incredibly dangerous for the people working on power lines. And if they catch you, you will be fined or worse. Okay? So what happens on loss of power? I have a solenoid switch here, and this will transfer over to generator power once the generator power becomes available, and transfer back to utility power when the utility power has come back on and proven to be stable. A transfer switch is a transfer switch. Its purpose is to give you access to electrical circuits either under utility power or generator power, but not both at the same time. Okay? So a transfer switch will be something like this. Okay? When using a natural gas generator, and yes, I'll get to the portables here in a little bit, it's important to know how much fuel that generator is going to consume. And you can see here a 14 kW will burn 193,000 BTUs of natural gas per hour. It will burn 203,000 BTUs worth of LP. That's just over 2 gallons per hour. Okay? still want that whole house generator? Okay, now, that is a full load usage. The numbers go down somewhat when you get into partial loads. Okay? So then there are essential load standby generators. It's basically the same generator, but we're going to operate this thing a little differently. It's going to be a smaller generator. Oh, I did forget one thing I wanted to mention. On the whole house, oh, no, I'll catch that in a minute. Sorry about that. What we would wire into this generator, we're not going to use the whole house panel anymore. We're going to use what's called an essential loads panel, which means when I switch over to generator power, I'm going to a much smaller electrical box. Only the things that I have to have. Medical devices, refrigerator, heating and ventilating air conditioning system, limited other appliances, limited lighting, and a current coffee pot.
Yes.
Be careful with those. They use a lot more power than you think they do. And you'll see that here in a minute. Okay, typically they're smaller capacity, which means they're going to consume less fuel, which means the operating costs are less. However, they're still an automatic generator, and they're still going to exercise once or twice a week. And you have to have that exercise cycle. Okay? An essential loads transfer switch will look something like this. We still have our solenoid switch here. But then we have a set of breakers to power whatever circuits. And when this switch has changed over to the generator, the circuits that are wired into this panel cannot be fed by outside power. Again, it's a safety thing. Now we have portable or RV generators. And I know a lot of people here use these or have a lot of questions about them, so I'm going to try and answer some of those. Typically, they're under 7.5 kW. They get to be a little heavy once you get over that because you're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of an 8 or 9, 10 horsepower motor. They can be set up and moved around during outages. They typically use extension cords to run limited loads. And I'm going to talk a lot about the extension cords because there have been a lot of house fires because inadequately sized extension cords have been used. Typically they use gasoline, but on the market now there are a lot of dual fuel generators coming on the market, and I would recommend a dual fuel if you can afford it. Here's why. What else do we have besides Southern Cal Edison that might cause us to lose power here in Southern California? Earthquakes. Right? If you have dual fuel, if gasoline becomes scarce, you can't use propane. Propane is often much easier to get during some type of natural disaster than gasoline is. So it gives you options. And I'm all about options, especially on the Monday afternoon scrambles at the golf course. Okay. They will require refueling during long periods of power outages. For instance, we had, 38, 39 hours without power last week? Whatever it was. You would probably have to fill a gasoline generator at least 3 times during that time period. Enclosed generators will be quieter than open frame. Typically, a portable generator is fairly loud. You don't do your neighbors any favors when you have a really loud generator and you ain't sharing. If they're complaining about your generator, give them an extension cord. My recommendation is you should still use a manual transfer switch if at all possible. Again, this prevents you from accidentally putting power to the street power or to street lines. Pay attention to the warranty policies and read reviews of generators. Especially the negative ones. The people that give it 1 star, see why they did. I've seen 1-star generators. Well, this doesn't do what they said it would do because they weren't looking at the right numbers. This is what portable generators can look like. Some of the new ones, like my friend Gary back there just purchased today, has a remote start. Yes?
Just a quick question. I thought by law you have to have a transfer switch. By law. Am I incorrect in that?
That I do not know. You'll see what I do know about laws and permits here shortly. But I don't know that you have to have a transfer switch. I am not aware that that's the case, but I do not know. See? I told you I wouldn't lie to you. Various types of portable generators. Okay? Like I said, the inverter type are quieter if that is an issue. So inverter type generators are similar in size and style, but they work a little differently. They generate AC power, they convert it back to DC, and then invert it back to AC. And I know it sounds convoluted, but this is the same process that's used in ductless split heating and air conditioning systems. So the technology has been around for probably close to 20 years at this point, and it's proven. However, typically there are size limitations. They are more expensive. They, however, produce cleaner power because they can respond faster. They also only generate the amount of power that's required at any given moment. Again, like ductless splits, they can ramp up when you need a lot of heating or air conditioning. They ramp down when you don't. Yes, sir?
What do you mean by cleaner power?
It is smoother electrically.
Okay.
It is more consistent to 60 hertz. Again, they're quieter because they don't have to run at 3,600 RPMs. They can throttle down to low RPMs, still generating power, because the 60 cycles is generated through electronic circuitry. They use less fuel for same capacities, but typically they have smaller fuel tanks. Those that are onboard fuel tanks are typically smaller. And if you look at a lot of the websites, you'll see that they'll only hold 1.5 gallons or so of fuel. Yes, ma'am?
When using gasoline, I've been reading that you probably should use premium because it doesn't have something in it that leaves water in.
Well,
can you talk about that?
That I'm not familiar with, but I will say I think premium is best because it does not lose its octane as fast as regular. That's why a lot of the Priuses and other electric vehicle or dual fuel vehicles tell you to use premium fuel because you typically don't use very much. And it sits in your gas tank for a long time. Your opinion can be your opinion. Use what you want. For the amount of gas I'm going to use, I'll pay the extra 30 cents a gallon. But that's just me. They are per watt, they are more expensive than a standard portable, but they're not the same. They'll typically look something like this for a small one. They also come in standard cube shape. They are made on the same frame as some of the other RV portables as well. Generator permits. I just got this information today from a friend of mine who is an electrical superintendent for a large contractor in LA. Yes?
Back to that last slide with the inverters. Can you hook two together to generate more power without losing any health and safety issues?
Yes, but you have to use their wiring harness. Okay, there are it'd be essentially a twinning kit, and you can put up to 5 of them together. The only advantage to doing that has to do with handling the weight.
Do they have to be the same size as those cars?
I can't answer that. I would buy a bigger generator because it'll be less expensive.
Do they need transfer switches as well?
I recommend them. And I'll show you some. They're not terribly expensive for what they give you. Permits required for all standby generators. Okay? Because of the electrical installation and power and control wiring. The transfer switch and load center wiring and the fuel line installation. This is typically not a homeowner done job. I know you can as a homeowner. I don't recommend it.
This is not the portable generator.
No, this is a standby permanently mounted generator. You are required to have an air quality management district permit, and it gets renewed every year. Because this thing runs for 20 minutes every 1 or 2 weeks, depending on how the controller lets you set it up. A permit is required, here we go, for manual transfer switch installations. Doesn't say you have to have one, but if you put one in, a permit is required. Over 5 kW of portable generators, they require a one-time permit. As he put it, we've had generators on job site for more than a year and never had to renew the permit. Generators under 5 kW do not require a permit. All generators must be CARB compliant, and if you go to order a generator online, they will not ship a generator into California that is not CARB compliant, at least to my knowledge. And again, this was from an electrical superintendent whose specialty is code. Because as he put it, electricians come and go with the economy, but the guy who knows the code the best never leaves. He said he was going to become that guy. So sizing, this is probably the part that everybody came here for, right? There are many load calculation forms available on the internet. Use these forms to pick the needed loads in your home. You may very seriously think about essential loads once you've done a whole house calculation and gotten the prices for an installation. You're probably looking at a minimum of about $12,000. Just ballpark guess off the top of my head, don't hold me to it. Yes, sir.
Power factor. Could you explain power factor and how important it is or how unimportant it is?
I'm going to talk about it in a different way
Okay.
when we get into the loads.
Okay.
The whole house generator down.
No, this is how you're going to size your generator. No. A whole house standby generator, automatic transfer switch will probably start at $12,000 depending on the size of your house. Could be as high as 20. But there are other options. And that's what we're going to look at. We're going to see what the load we actually have is, or what we have to have. And that's how we'll decide how big a generator to get. Okay? So you can use, if you look at the form that I gave you on page 2, there are wattage calculations because when we buy generators in the United States, we buy them by watts. Which is why I don't want to get into power factor. That's a whole different discussion. You have two different types of loads typically. You've got running watts or operating watts. Okay? I have an electric water heater and I turn that electric water heater on and I draw a certain number of watts from that water heater. My furnace comes on and I start my inducer blower motor, I start my fan motor. In order to start that motor, I have to have extra wattage to get the motor to start, to get the motor up to speed. And that number is called starting watts, inrush power, or surge watts. And that's why a generator has a surge rating. Is because that tells you the maximum wattage the generator can put out for a couple of 2 or 3 seconds while that motor's coming up to speed. Because a motor typically will draw about 3 times the amount of running wattage it needs to start. It will be for a very brief time. And then it will drop down to its normal operating watts. Air conditioning compressors are real big on that. Okay? So are blower motors because you've got the resistance of the blower wheel against that motor. So generators need to account for the highest motor starting or surge watts. Yes?
On appliances, are those numbers that are on the plates on the freezers, on the refrigerators, multiplied? Is that going to give me starting watts or is that going to give me running watts?
Typically it would be running. It will not be starting.
Okay. There's no real way to get starting watts?
Yeah, there is. It's on that form. When a generator is too small and can't handle the load, it slows down. When it slows down, it's no longer turning at 3,600 RPMs. It's generating less hertz. Below 57 hertz can damage sensitive electronics. So if you have too small of a generator, your TV may not work so well. So how do we know? Again, for load calculation, I can go to kohlerpower.com, generac.com. My favorite one is northerntool.com. They've got a great one. It uses pictures. So simple, even a caveman can do it. And it keeps a running total in the corner as you pick things out. And you look and you click on Keurig and it adds 1,500 starting watts. And you go, holy crap, that's going to be one expensive cup of coffee. Norwal.com, Amazon.com. There's electricgeneratordirect.com. There are tons of generator companies out there that would love to do business with you. Do 2 or 3 and see how they compare. The handout I gave you is actually an Amazon sizing form. Okay? Yes, sir.
On your sheet, you have the fact that you only use the highest starting load because only one was started down. That's just like jobs, they're only one at a time. What if two could one start one at a time? Jobs, does that happen to slim?
They're pretty slim. I won't say they're slim to none and slim just left town, but they're pretty slim. Because you're only talking about a 2 or 3 second period of time. What it's all going to come down to is the time delays that are built in. I know that when we had the last power outage, that I was awake when the power was restored, it typically, my furnace came on first, and then about 2 minutes later my refrigerator started. There are time delays built in to various appliances for that exact purpose. So my recommendation is start with essential loads. The refrigerator. You look on that, I believe it says 600 watts plus something in the neighborhood of 2,200 watts of starting load. So right there, I am at 2,800 watts peak load for several seconds. If I have, yes sir?
When a refrigerator shuts down and then restarts, is that a starting load again? So the refrigerator has several starting load cycles?
Yes. A refrigerator is designed to run about 16 hours a day. That's what it's designed for, or how it's designed. Okay, so it will be starting periodically. Also, it will be off periodically. If it's larger than 21 or 22 cubic feet, you need to adjust that number up. You have one of the big, I forget the brand name, but the big, giant side-by-sides. Something like a Viking. There's another brand that's real common too, and I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. But those are going to have bigger compressors. The starting load is going to be bigger. Your HVAC system furnace blower motor. Typically, they're somewhere in the neighborhood of a half horsepower. And that will probably be your biggest load unless you have you pick your air conditioner as one of your essential loads. Okay? You have to account for the compressor and the outdoor fan motor. Enough lights to get around the house, CFLs will help you lower that number. If you've got 20 60-watt light bulbs, you're talking 1,200 BTUs right there. Medical devices that require 24/7 power, such as oxygen generators. And my current coffee pot. Yes, sir.
And I may be a little bit off this subject, so forgive me if I am. I'm gathering from the amount of attention that all this stuff is getting, that this, it sounds like a problem that they're anticipating is going to go on almost ad infinitum. Is that your...
You mean for the power issue?
Yes.
Somewhere between 1 and 10 years. Earthquakes have been going on for a couple centuries that we are aware of out here. Yes, sir.
If you have 2 refrigerators, you double the surge?
No, you go with the one that's the highest. You can also buy, if you want to try and stagger it even more, You can buy another time delay and put it in the system. Just a plug-in time delay. Yes, sir?
I think I know the answer, but I don't want to assume. The likelihood of you having all of your appliances and stuff at the same time is pretty slim.
Starting at the same, absolutely. All thermostats have it, all modern thermostats have a 5-minute time delay built into them for exactly this purpose. So that when power comes back on, they don't start when all the lights and everything else are trying to start. I know my refrigerator has a time delay because, like I said, the last time we had a power outage that I was awake when it was reestablished, I was worried because my refrigerator didn't come on for a few minutes. And then all of a sudden it started up.
So your coffee pot is unlikely to be competing with your refrigerator in the middle of the night.
Depends if you're up watching somebody on TV. Okay. So the way this works, yes.
So if you bought a small scale 2,000 watt portable and your refrigerator takes 2,500 the surge, is that a no-go?
It may well be. You will pop a circuit breaker, you'll be able to reset it. You won't damage the generator, you won't help the refrigerator.
So if I know already that it takes 25, I should be looking
Right.
at
And by the way, that brings me to something I did not mention with the inverters, is when you look at the number, the model number, it's often the surge or inrush watts, not the capacity of the generator. Like that Honda 2200 that I showed you, I looked at that, and that was the surge wattage, not the running watts. The running watts were either 16 or 1800. So you have to pay attention to the numbers. So volts times amps equals watts, and I put this up here because we buy them by wattage. Yes, sir?
How does this interface with solar power that you have?
That I cannot answer. I can tell you that if you're off the grid, there are generators made specifically for solar systems.
That would be my next.
There are generators that generate DC power. They don't have, essentially they're made without the rotor and will generate power. But it is expensive power compared to the sunshine. Yes, sir?
On this slide, let's say the 120 volt, which is standard home, 20 amp, that's going to be 2,400 watts. The one I have, the generator I have, has both a DC and AC power outlets.
Okay.
So if I wanted to use both at the same time, how do I calculate, do I have to add?
You have to add them together.
Okay.
Did I see another hand back here somewhere?
I don't know how to do the DC, but how do we calculate the DC?
It's the same way. It's
Same
wattage.
way. Oh, okay. So we use that
Volts
same
times
formula.
amps equals watts.
Okay.
Now, if you're talking about, what are you going to use the DC power for?
For an inverter. So,
Why?
okay. That's what I was wondering.
An inverter takes DC power and turns it into AC.
Yeah. So, okay, it just has both, so
Yeah.
I just got the generator.
Your capacity is the same.
Okay, so you figure out both of them and add them together. Okay.
Okay. Again, you've got running watts or rated watts. And if I've got an air conditioner, I have to add the starting watts to the running watts to get my surge capacity. And this has to be able to do this for up to 3 seconds. It is a temporary surge. Okay? So here's my house. I have a little 1,400 square foot 1974 special, no insulation, cut off A-frame, crappiest house on the block that I got at a fire sale, and spent a year and a half rehabbing it before I moved in. So these are the loads that I would have in my house. A refrigerator, 21 cubic feet, 600 running watts, 2,200 starting watts. I have a 60,000 BTU gas furnace. It has about a half horsepower blower motor in it, 800 running watts, 2,300 starting watts. Now, if I have a 100,000 BTU gas furnace and a 5-ton air conditioner, I'm going to have a 1 horsepower motor in there, and those numbers are going to at least double. I have a fan for the gas fireplace. I have about 100 running watts, 300 starting watts. My light's about 200 watts. My Keurig is 1,000 watts. Keurigs, when they're heating the water, that heating element draws a lot of power, which is how I get that water to 191 degrees in a matter of under a minute. My TV is about 250 watts, and my DVD player is somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 watts. I'm going to take that higher number, whether it's the DVD or the DVR. So if I add it up, I got 3,300 running watts. Sounds pretty good, right? My highest starting watts is 2,350. It's my furnace motor. That gives me a total of 5,650 surge watts. So that's what I'm looking for on the surge number. If I remove my video and Keurig, I drop to 4,050. Now, the temptation is, I won't turn this on until everything is running. But what do? We forget. So you don't want to get yourself in trouble that way, because your generator will stop generating and everything will die, and it will be a dark and stormy night. Don't use a too small generator thinking you'll turn stuff off when the other stuff is going to come on, because you'll forget. A generator would be sized for peak or surge watts at this point, at least 4,000 watts. What I need. But with what that'll do for running watts, I'll get my Keurig and TV back. Yes, ma'am?
If you were to slave 2 inverter generators together, 2,000, would you then be able to run something that had a 3,000?
Yes.
Okay, so it would take that.
As long as they are ganged together.
Okay.
Not powering different circuits, but ganged together. Yes?
So when you're calculating the starting watts, you're taking the highest wattage of all of your appliances and adding that to the total of the
Running watts.
Okay, thank you.
If you go to northerntool.com, like I said, you can plug in what you use and it will give you a running total as you go.
Quick follow-up. The 5,000 watt threshold permit you talked about earlier?
Yes.
500 kilowatt. Is that the running watt? Is that the total?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
That I can't answer. My guess would be running watts.
Okay, so if you bought a generator that has a running watt of 4,500, you can do a surge of 6,000, you still theoretically be under the 5,000.
Yeah, and it's a one-time permit. Nobody's going to come inspect anything. Okay. So with the whole house generator load, you can do the same thing. You go through and you pick everything you have, and it'll give you a good idea of what you need. Now, if you're going to that expense and you discover, whoa, I need a 40 kW generator because I got all kinds of stuff. Everything's electric in my house. What you can do is you can go to a priority load shed device where you prioritize the loads. And it will then energize circuits if the power is available for those loads. And you prioritize A through D. A are your most important essential loads, your refrigerator, your furnace. B are your second most important, your TV, your current, whatever you choose. And so on, down to the electric dryer, the electric stove, whatever you have. Because one 8-inch burner is 2,000 watts on an electric stove. It's a bunch. And why my wife wouldn't let me put in gas, I don't know.
How do you then, once you have the generator, how do you then subtract out those appliances you don't want? Like, we have a fireplace, you might not want or need for 3 or 4 days, heating. And so how do we take that offline?
It depends. Okay, I'll talk about that. That's a partial load. We'll talk about that here when we get into transfer switches in just a minute. Okay? Now, when you are looking at a generator, all generators are rated with the highest rating of any fuel that they have. Uh-oh, it must be time for NCIS to start. Everybody's leaving. I'm trying not to, Ed. I'm trying not to. Okay. Generators are rated for the highest fuel available. The rating numbers you see for a dual fuel gas and propane generator will be shown, as you can see, the big numbers here, 4375 and 3500. That is on gasoline. It's all about the BTUs per pound of fuel. Okay? For those of you that remember when... great, line fart. What's the gas substitute they're using? It's not gas, ethanol. If you had a vehicle that was dual fuel or flex fuel, you might get 19 miles a gallon on gasoline, but you'd only get about 14 miles a gallon on ethanol because it doesn't have the same number of BTUs per gallon. Okay? You can see if I run it on propane, I'm at 39.50 and 31.50. So there is a significant drop, particularly in the running watts. The same thing happens with propane and natural gas for standby generators. A 20 kW natural gas generator is only going to give you 17.5 kW on natural gas. It's rated for propane. A 14 kW generator will give you 12.5 because propane has more BTUs per gallon or per cubic foot as they rate with appliances. So how much fuel do I need? Once you pick your generator, you're looking for on-site fuel storage to be enough for 3 to 5 days. Needs to be kept in a safe place and stored in a proper manner away from a running generator. Use only storage containers made for that purpose. Fuels like gas and diesel should be kept fresh as possible, if not stabilize them. You don't have to use premium. I have read that it keeps its octane level high longer. The choice is yours. Propane, on the other hand, can be stored indefinitely. Now, yes, sir.
In general, how long would stored gas be good?
If we stop using our generators here in November because we finally get some rain, you probably won't use it again until January when we have another power outage. I would probably, for the sake of expediency, I would put stabilizer in it. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Does propane produce as much CO2?
Does it what?
Produce as much carbon monoxide?
That you mean CO?
Yes.
Yes, it will.
So it's just as dangerous?
Yes. Now, if you are sizing a propane tank just for fun, you not only size it for the generator, you have to size it for your house, because one is assuming that you have other gas-fired appliances as well. If you have a gas-fired water heater, when that water heater comes on, it uses around 140 to 180,000 BTUs per hour. It's not very long, it's only while you're making hot water. But if you have that coming out of the line and your tank isn't atomizing enough gas, it will stop the generator from running. Yes, sir?
What about a tankless?
That is a tankless.
Oh, okay.
Tankless is used far more fuel at one time than a regular gas water heater. A regular gas water heater, 40 gallons will only burn, or 50 gallons will only burn 50,000 BTUs an hour. And there's a reason for that. You start getting into code changes above that. But if you have a range, and it's Thanksgiving, and this is when all this stuff happens, right? You could need to have 300,000 BTUs of capacity plus what your generator is drawing. Because you're using the hot water, you're using the stove, the range, the oven. Okay? It all adds up. And if you're doing it, you should be working through a professional, and your tank should be sized for about 20 degrees Fahrenheit worth of atomization, because that's about how cold it gets here. Okay? So I need to be somewhere in the neighborhood of a 500-gallon tank. Remember, propane does not go bad. Buy it in the summertime. It's cheaper. And your tank needs to be at least a quarter full. You will not get proper atomization otherwise. I was fighting a friend of mine has a rental house up on the top of Jacaranda, and the furnace wasn't working late at night. Well, we found out the guy only had put 50 gallons of propane in it, and it wasn't enough once it got below that level. All right, so now we're going to transfer power to our house circuits. Standby generators use automatic switches. It happens automatically. I guess I'm running a little long. I'll try and speed this up to get you out of here in about half an hour. What happens is they sense when street power is lost, waits a few seconds, make sure it's gone, and then it signals the generator to start. The generator starts, it gets up to 3,600 RPMs, it's making stable power, the transfer switch transfers. And by the way, when a transfer switch transfers, it is loud. It goes bang. Okay? Just be prepared. The This happens between 8 and 30 seconds depending on the timing sequence of the generator and the control system. Okay? When the utility power returns, it starts another timing sequence. Typically it runs between 5 and 7 minutes to ensure that street power really is back. How many times have we had power come on, it's on for about a minute, and then it shuts back off again, or it's on for a few seconds, and then it drops back out? Well, you don't want the generator starting and stopping like that, so it waits for a bit. And then the generator then goes through a cool down cycle. Cool down is very important, because again, it's running at 3,600 RPMs, it's hot. Again, we have our transfer switch. Manual transfer switches, I strongly recommend them. They simplify the wiring of the generator and they make the operation much safer. Yes?
So if you have a manual transfer switch, do you have to have another sub-panel put in with breakers?
I'll show you what they look like here in a second. They come that way. They're manually switched to generator power after the warm-up time. A lot of the generators I've seen, they require that you warm them up before you start the power. And the guys I know that have them, they all start their generator, run their cords, and then once they hook everything up, it takes them 5 minutes or so, their generator's warm. The advantage to a manual transfer switch is you have one cable to connect. You don't have to leave a door or window open to run extension cords through. Until these last two power outages and the planned ones we had this summer, the last time we lost power, it was about 19 degrees out. I wouldn't have wanted to have my doors and windows open. It eliminates the use of extension cords. It eliminates open doors. All circuits are protected by circuit breaker in the transfer switch. Circuit breakers protect the wiring. Manually switch back when utility power returns. It simplifies the setup, especially in bad weather. And again, it prevents electrical power from going back into the power grid. They look like this. There are a number of different ones on the market. If you Google manual transfer switch, 500 of them will come up. Generally speaking, for a generator 5,000 watts and under 6 circuits. Over 5,000 watts, 10 circuits. And you can see what they look like here, and they all have circuit breakers built in. Many of them have watt meters, so you can see what your load is. This one here is a little different. This is a dedicated furnace transfer switch. These typically are installed by an electrician. They run anywhere from about $250 to $350. For the most part, if you get into the 10 circuit, they're more expensive. But again, what the benefit they offer is tremendous.
What does the electrician charge for hooking that up for you? Probably about $1,000 or something.
I have heard just a couple hundred.
Oh wow.
400.
Is it? I don't know. I haven't had one done.
That's what I was quoted.
Okay, $400. But he's going to pull the permits, and it's permanently wired in, and you got one place to plug this thing in. That's it. No extension cords to trip on through the house. And then what I would do is take and turn one circuit on that is not connected to this, that's connected to lights somewhere. And when those lights come on, I know power is back. Because it's a manual switch, it's not going to switch back on its own. I also would recommend a disconnect in the line as well. You don't have to have one necessarily, but I would recommend it.
Does anything happen if this power comes on in the middle of the night and you don't use the manual switch? Not aware of it?
You just Live on your generator until the next morning. But everybody wants to know when power's back because we want our life back.
What is it?
We've all become a bunch of wimps. Yes, sir.
Are you saying that the manual transfer switch typically does not have a disconnect switch embedded in it?
Typically, no.
Does the generator you purchased tell you the size of the cord that you're using to plug into?
By the plugs, and typically if you see a 3 or 4 prong twist, it'll either say 20 or 30 amps. It will have circuit breakers built into it that also give you the guideline. I'll talk about that in a little bit when I get into wiring in just a second.
By disconnect switch, you mean disconnecting 3 power at the time?
No, generator power. Local codes may require it. I cannot tell you. I did not ask this particular question. I know that in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, that they do require a disconnect.
Have you talked about pricing yet?
No, and I'm not going to talk a whole lot other than very general terms.
Okay, I'll wait till you get there.
Is there any other? Did I miss somebody? I thought there was one more in. Okay. Cables and extension cords must be sized properly. A 16-gauge extension cord is too small. The longer the cord, the more resistance to flow, the more heat can be generated. Lower gauge means larger wire, less resistance to flow. 10 gauge for a 30 amp feed, 25 feet long. That is the normal generator supply cord. I'll show you a picture of those in just a second. We want to keep our main feed length to 25 feet from the generator. Any longer and you start getting voltage drop. Use only a cord made for the power feed. 12 gauge will feed a 20 amp circuit at most. You may see a lower number on your cable, right, Gary? Gary just bought one. He got a 12 amp cord and it says 12 gauge cord. It says 15 amps. 14 gauge for limited lighting only, 10 amp circuit. Your refrigerator is on at least a 15 amp, if not a 20 amp breaker. Same thing with your furnace. Longer length means voltage drop. Voltage drop, amps go up, and heat is generated. This is what they look like. Okay, you can see we've got a 3-prong plug. Here it's 4. We've got one here that's got 4 outlets. This one has 4, this one has 3. Use only cords made for this purpose. That one you bought for $12.95 at True Value is a 16 gauge cord at best. Don't use it for anything more than a nightlight. Read the manual. If you're doing a portable or using a portable generator, read the manual and understand it before you get started. Read all the safety warnings. Know the clearance requirements. This is very important. Wire sizes are not recommendations, they are requirements. Your safety is more important than sheer convenience. All generator loads must be disconnected from utility power. Again, I think this is about the 4th time I've said this. It's very important. It does really bad things. Failure to do so will cause a backfeed to utility lines when it comes back. It's dangerous for electrical workers and your equipment. It's illegal and you will be fined. Not to mention I have seen furnace motors that all of a sudden don't last more than 45 days because relays have been fried. Use properly sized cables. Don't scrimp to save a couple of bucks. Turn off your main breaker or use a transfer switch. That will ensure that you can't backfeed. Standby and portable generators are to be used outdoors only. Inside your garage is not a wise application. It needs to be outside where it can get unobstructed combustion air and where the byproducts of combustion can go away. Again, it's about safety. Carbon monoxide can kill you. Yes, sir.
I had a question when you're talking about, ventilation. We get snow up here, and
shovel around it.
But what other options do you have? Are there stands?
I'll show you one thing that I have seen, or that I saw today. It's coming up here in a minute. But no, seriously, when I was back east and we were installing generators, it was just shovel around them and get the snow away.
Yeah, that's one option, but is there some other option?
You can put them under some sort of an overhang. You're going to have to choose the material and you're going to have to follow clearances. Read the user manual for placement and clearances. Never less than 8 feet from an opening window or door. If you're going to be closer than that, the window or door must be permanently pinned closed. Exhaust a minimum of 10 feet from furnace and water heater air intakes. And I would say 10 feet from if it's an outdoor unit as well, because the combustion byproducts will destroy the wiring in an outdoor condensing unit. I've seen it. It's very acidic. Exhaust 10 feet from furnace and water. That's so that you're not pulling in the combustion byproducts instead of oxygen or air into the appliance. It interferes with the combustion process of that appliance and can clog up the heat exchanger. The exhaust is hot. It will burn grass. Hot exhaust could damage siding and landscaping. In wet weather, a portable generator must be covered in some way. I'll show you something I found online today when I was looking. Outdoor control boxes such as the transfer switch must be in a NEMA-rated outdoor enclosure, a rain-tight enclosure. Now, one gentleman who is an electrician here in the valley made a comment. I happen to know him. Made a comment on next door. Talk to your insurance company and see what happens if there's a fire caused by the generator. So I got online and I went to my insurance company and I had this little chat. And she wrote, each claim is subject to review of what caused the damage, so to speak. But as long as you were not found negligent or like purposely set your home on fire, I was tempted a few times with that wonderful green shag carpet I still had in my house. You'd likely be covered using a generator. Notice how general that is. You might or you might not. I say likely because it has to be reviewed by an adjuster for approval, but if you are using the generator properly, you shouldn't have an issue having a claim covered. That's what my insurance company told me. I am not telling you that that's what your insurance company will tell you. Okay? Standby generators are all UL approved. If they are installed properly, you got the permits, they got inspected, you should be covered. This is what I found for portables. Yeah, I know, it's cute, huh? Wait till you see the price, it's really cute too. About 130 bucks. It's basically a tent. It uses fiberglass poles. It's got brackets that extend out from the frame to give it clearances. And it has the ability to open up the one side so you can refuel the generator. My guess would be, and again this is just a guess, that the heat from the generator will melt any snow that falls on it, and it'll just simply run off just like rainwater. And this is available from, I think it's Electrical Generators Direct. Yes?
Right now, we've got a lot of leaves blowing around.
I got nothing. You might put up some kind of a screen, but that's something you'd have to come up with. Market it, you can make thousands on the internet.
See you next year.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about maintenance for a minute. Inside the user manual, there will be a maintenance chart that tells you what needs to be done and how often. We're getting close, folks. Okay? This one happens to be for a Kohler generator, and there are maintenance kits available for many generators on the market. Typically, you're going to want to change the oil at least once a year, depending on your running hours. In fact, if you remember when Jiffy Lube was advertising a lot, they'll say change your oil every 3 months or 3,000 miles. It's because oil is hygroscopic. It can absorb moisture out of the air. Not a huge deal here when we're at 3% humidity, but nonetheless, over a period of time, acids will form. Good maintenance practices will extend the life of the generator, so it will be ready to use when you buy it. Generators, as I said, operate typically at 3,600 RPMs, unless you've got a big one. It's like starting a car at almost full throttle. You need to have the engine lubricated, or it will go bang. Standby generators typically use a synthetic oil for this reason. The little portables, not so much, because they're going to want you to change the oil much more frequently. The way to think about this is your generator has a lawnmower engine in it. Literally. The same 28 horsepower Kohler command engine you'll find in a lawn tractor is the same engine that's in a 20 kW generator. Other manufacturers, Briggs does the same thing. Now, I'm not pushing Kohler here. I realize I've pronounced that name a number of times. You can take that and turn it into Generac, Briggs & Stratton, Rheem, any generator brand you want. Typically, all small generators are going to use the same type of engine. The fuel needs to be fresh or stabilized. If I'm putting my generator away in March, I won't anticipate using it again, hopefully never, but at least until October. Propane power generators are cleaner and require less maintenance. There's less chemicals in it compared to gasoline, which gasoline sits in a carburetor and then eventually evaporates out. It's going to create a varnish that can stop the carburetor from working properly. The other thing about propane is that the tanks need a minimum amount of fuel in the tank for atomization. Changing the oil. Follow the manufacturer's guide religiously. Change the oil at a minimum on a small portable generator every 40 hours. More often if required by the manual. Most good quality generators have a low oil cutoff. Again, these engines are not as tight as a car engine. They will burn oil. Check the oil at least once every 24 hours. Add more if you need to. They will burn oil. You didn't pay $40,000 for the thing. The engine isn't the same quality as what you'd find in a car. Unless, of course, you buy a 30 kW generator and it's got a GM 4.6 liter engine in it. Seriously. The 50 horsepowers have 350s. It's interesting. All right, use the specified oil per the manual. There are a lot of oils out there that are a little bit different. I bought the one and only Toyota that says you use 0 to 30 weight oil. Cost me $75 to get an oil change. Use the oil they recommend. Standby generators, typically the oil will get changed every 100 to 150 hours. Don't forget, they ran once a week or once every 2 weeks. So they've got a little more run time, but that also keeps the circulation a little more, and it's going to be synthetic. Follow the manufacturer's requirements and keep records for warranty purposes. Prove that you did the maintenance. Otherwise, it's like you buy a new car, you never go get the oil changed, it never gets put into Carfax, and the engine dies at 35,000 miles. They open it up and there's nothing but tar in the crankcase. The warranty is voided. Change the spark plug. Spark plugs become fouled after a period of use. Cracked ceramics cause grounding, preventing the ignition. 20 kW and under generators, like I said, use a lawn tractor engine. These engines do not burn cleanly. Multi-cylinder engines typically will have one plug that burns a little bit richer or builds up a little more carbon than the other. This is normal. They use one for the load side of turning the alternator. The other one is just to help it come around again. Gap the plugs to the manufacturer's specs before replacing them. Use a feeler gauge. They're rarely the right gap when you buy them. Like I said, be aware gas can cause varnish in the carburetor requiring service. Engine pre-cleaners can help the carburetor. And some of the maintenance kits come with those. Don't forget to stabilize the fuel. Change or clean the air filter. This is really important around here. Okay? We get a tremendous amount of blowing dust during any kind of day here in Tehachapi. I think I dusted my house in Vermont about once a month. Here it's more like once a day or once a week if I feel like being messy. Okay? More often if we have Santa Ana winds. These winds at 50, 60 miles an hour are blowing all kinds of dust. We're dusty and dirty, and that does not help our engine. Try and locate your generator where it isn't subject to the blowing dust, if at all possible. Okay, here's the deal. On a normal day, the wind blows from west to east. Santa Ana's, the wind blows from east to west. All right, check your battery periodically. Kind of hard to charge a battery if you don't have any power. Battery charge degrades over time. Check the battery charge as suggested in the manual. Charge with a suitable charger. Standby generators have a built-in battery charger, so you don't have to do that. Most generators do not charge the battery during general operation. Just be aware of that. If your battery isn't holding a charge, replace it. Just like when you want to start your lawn tractor in the spring and you haven't charged your battery all winter, depends whether you got a good one or not, right? General maintenance kits are available. This is what they'll typically contain. So, for a smaller generator, this is the pre-cleaner they want you to use. Spark plug because it's a single cylinder, a funnel, a towel, the oil filter, and the air filter. Can you build your own? Absolutely. Just follow the requirements of the generator manufacturer. Keep your records so that you can prove maintenance was done. These generators typically also have hour meters on them. So write down the hours. Get a little logbook. I know Gary's going to do this. You get a little logbook and you log everything you do. Just like he does with his wine. This is a maintenance sequence I came up with. Gap and change your spark plug. You want to do it first because it's cold. And I don't know, I've worked around a lot of generators and you've got to have pretty nimble fingers for a lot of them. Simulate a power outage if you have a transfer switch and run for 5 or 10 minutes. You don't have to do this, it's just annual maintenance. Run for the generator for 5 or 10 minutes, drain the oil, change the oil and air filters. Check if you have a controller, if there are any error codes, check for that. Do a visual inspection. Install your new oil. Verify the level on the dipstick. Run to ensure there's no leaks. Re-verify the oil level once it's filled the oil filter. Some generators have the oil filter on top, some have it down on the side. If you have a maintenance timer in the controller, reset it. You probably won't have that on a portable. Keep records. Dates the maintenance was performed, the hours on the genset, what was done, keep the receipts. The records, again, show you followed the manufacturer's requirements and will help grease the way for a warranty claim. Some of the generators out there have a 1-year warranty. Some are 2, some are 5, some are 8, some are 10. That should factor in to your generator search. Okay? Proper maintenance will keep your genset operating longer. Okay. That is all I've got for tonight. I'm ready for questions.